Hi everyone, it's Lucy from My Crazy Craft Life, and today I'm here with a design team post for Fairy Stamper. So today I'm going to be making this card. I will tell you this is definitely any problem that I could have possibly had making this card I had, and it didn't completely turn out the way I wanted it, but I'm happy with how it turned out for the most part. And so I'm just going to kind of walk you through and kind of tell you the things definitely don't do if you're going to try to make a similar card. I started out by stamping with VersaFine Onx Black Ink Misty stamp and the Fairy Stage, and then I am using like a blank stamp to mirror stamp because I want two of Misty so that she was supposed to be able to spin, although that's not what ended up happening, but that's why I was mirror stamping, so that I could have both sides be the same. Now I used a few different inks and I ended up with using VersaFine, but then I still had to go back because it was such a big difference in the coloring with a marker and just kind of tracing over all of the color that was there, because I wanted it to at least be pretty similar to what I was doing. Then I took the stage, and both I cut out, or actually all three I cut out on my scan and cut, and then I cut out the center of the stage because I originally wanted her to spin within the stage. And then I just took a black marker and kind of cleaned up some of the edges. I do end up going back and cutting out kind of the bottom part of the stage because there's actually going to be a stage that could pop out. So I'm going to take some clear nylon thread and put it between and kind of sandwich it between the two Misty images so that I have that there. And like I said, originally I was going to put this through the stage, which actually would have worked out perfectly if I didn't have it pop out, but then I couldn't figure out how I was going to get it to spin without it popping out and being away from the card. So I ended up cutting out the entire kind of center and then the white little area of the stage. Then I'm going to take a card panel and I cut it a little less than 4 1/4 because I didn't want it to get stuck or stick out. And I just used some Distress Oxides and the greens I had to kind of make a base. And then I used a piece of the Bumbletwinkle paper pad for kind of the top panel where it's going to end up going, where actually Misty will end up being attached to. But like I said, originally I wasn't going to do that. I just wanted to kind of make sure and see, and so that I didn't have the white sticking in between, I just took some of the darkest green that I used, excuse me, that matches the panel that I'm going to put on the bottom of the card, and just kind of did the center where it folds. Then I took a 2 inch by 2.5 inch piece of black cardstock, and this is what I was going to use for the pop-out mechanism, and I scored it at 1/2 inch, at 1.5 inches, and at 2 inches, and that's what's going to kind of make the base that's going to pop out. I centered the panel and I did it 2 inches from 1 inch on each side of the center dot so that I can kind of line that up and put it down there. And then I'm going to poke a hole here because, like I said, I decided that this was where it had to go in order to spin. And I'm going to tape it down with just some Scotch tape and then cut off the long piece of it. I do end up putting this down, and like I said, I had to fiddle with this and play with this so much, and it didn't completely, like I said, come out how I wanted it, but I don't dislike the card now that I finished it, but it took me way longer and way more issues than I really wanted to have while I was making this. So I'm going to take the stage, and right now I have it through the hole of the little stage at the top, and then the bottom is on the little black pop-out piece. And see, it spins really well and everything is great and it looks really cool, and I taped it down, except I realized that once I tape down the other side of the pop-out mechanism, it won't actually fold correctly. So see that right there is where I'm kind of figuring out, like, wait a minute, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I take the tape up, and then I decide, okay, it's going to have to go onto the panel that's going to go on the top side of the card. So I decide to put this panel inside of the card, so at least that gives me some bearings on what it's going to do once it's in there. And then I'm going to start kind of tinkering with this on how I'm going to make that happen. And I made a hole, and then I did end up having to make a second hole, which really wasn't a big deal because later on I covered it up. Not that you could really see it, it was a little pinhole, but just like I said, for my own knowledge of it being there, so you can't see it because I actually ended up stamping over it. But I do kind of thread that through, and when it was so far down, it wouldn't spin at all. And I moved it up a little bit more, but by this time I had already cut it when I had it attached to the stage. I already cut the length of the nylon thread, so I didn't have a ton to be able to play with. So I ended up being able to kind of get it to spin, but I think if you would have pushed it up further on that panel, it would have spun when you opened it up, because I wanted it to be a pop-out and a spinning card at the same time. And like I said, I didn't end up completely getting that, but I did end up at least kind of getting the idea that I wanted there. Now, the other thing I realized was that that stage, because this is an A2 size card, so it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, the stage being on that pop-up mechanism is actually larger than the card. And I'll be really honest, because by this time I was probably already a couple hours into trying to make this card, and I was kind of okay with it and just going to put it in a bigger envelope. But then I did end up finding a way that I could, see, I was still playing with it, trying to get it to spin. And like I said, it does a little bit, but I think it needed to be higher. So then I decided to take the sentiment heart dance, and I'm going to stamp that on the inside of the card. And after I had all of this inside together, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with the outside of the card. So I originally stamped it just on the white, and I decided I did not like that. I used the Mystical Moon, and I do end up taking another piece of the Bumbletwinkle paper pad and stamping the Mystical Moon and the fairy note on that, along with a bunch of the notes, from the musical notes stamp. And I just end up stamping that all over the front of the card, and I actually do it on the inside and the back of the inside back, like where the girl is Misty is standing, so that, and see, this is how I end up taking care of that. There is a line in that stamp that I was able to just cut straight across, and so that's how I made it fit into the card. But I think if you used a bigger card and moved it up, you would actually get the spinning, and you would actually be able to fit the entire thing in there. Like making a 5 1/2 inch square card would work really well, or a 5 by 7 card would have worked. But yeah, mine didn't. So this is where I'm stamping it all around. And like I said, I don't show the entire thing, and I don't show doing the entire inside of it, because it's really just me taking the different stamps and stamping the inside and the outside. So that is it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I will help you kind of not make some of the mistakes. Be sure to check out the Facebook page for Fairy Stamper, as well as the store for all of these products. And I want to thank everybody for joining me. Thanks again. Take care.